Welcome to the Rhode Island Liberty Report, your source for libertarian commentary on current events in the Ocean State and Southern New England. Coming to you from Rothbard Studios.
Welcome back, and here we are with another episode of the Rhode Island Liberty Report. I'm Mike, and with me tonight, as always, are our co-hosts, Bill and Shawn. How you guys doing?
Doing great, Mike. How are you?
Good.
Doing good. It was cooler, and it's starting to get warmer now.
It was. Actually, it was warmer today. It's getting cooler tonight. I don't know. We're recording later on. I don't know. I get confused. Cooler, warmer, warmer, cooler.
She was right the whole time, damn it.
Yeah. She's not right about much, unfortunately.
So you got to give her her due when she is.
He paid us a little visit, was it 3 weeks ago? And then, I hear that the president now is coming to visit. I guess a good report back from the vice president to Biden. I don't know if anybody missed it. We had posted a little, I don't know, call it a meme, but a screenshot of the news story that he's coming to visit, and underneath that the article of Brown's leading, I guess, very leading the academic world in Alzheimer's research. Maybe he's going to that. Man. But
are we sure the beast can handle the potholes in the state of Rhode Island, or is it equipped to handle third world country roads?
Right. Yeah, I guess, I don't know. Maybe they have a special all-terrain vehicle that they use. I don't know. But we're gonna try to do a new little tidbit of information beginning of each episode here. We'll see how if we can remember to do it. And Shawn's got a little bit of info for us on what's going on with the monetary situation in Rhode Island.
Yeah, so there's a trend in Rhode Island right now where we're spending much more than the state's bringing in, and at the same point, we're incurring more debt. So as kind of a fun segment, we'd like to start talking a little bit about those at the beginning of each episode. So, by our count, the Rhode Island state debt is $11,762,000. Oh, nope. Sorry, that's way wrong. Edit that in post, Mike. That's $11,762,680,000 is our state debt right now. And we're spending over $13 billion right now. And we're not generating nearly that much money. It looks like we're about 10.5 billion in state revenue.
So it's interesting. It ties into an article that I read earlier this, I think it was this week. What's the date on this? Yeah, May 10th. From the WPRI, and it's apparently the soaring tax revenue gives Rhode Island leaders an extra $324 million for the state budget. So it's like, okay, they have an extra more tax revenue. I don't know where it's coming from. I forget in the article. I read it earlier, but I kind of liken it to like when you take out your summer's coming, you take out your summer clothes. And you find your shorts, and there's an extra $20 bill in it. And you're like, oh, it's free money. You're right. Like it's now all of a sudden they find the extra $324 billion. Let's spend it.
Well, it's already been spent, right? They're just reallocating funds is really what's going on. They probably found it by reallocating funds that they could replace with federal dollars they've got as a part of the COVID relief. So they have all this newly found cash that they can, put towards other things, or use the revenue they're actually collecting and put that towards other things.
I thought the general fund was that secret pocket of money. Was it not?
Oh, well, we all know that, right? It's the slush fund, the state slush fund.
So the debt clock, that says around what, $11,114 per Rhode Island citizen. So I just want to make note of that number for this week, and we'll talk about it again at a future date, hopefully.
Right. So realistically, everybody listening to this podcast in Rhode Island owes $11,114 right now, on top of whatever other debt you have, your mortgage and your rent bill and all that other stuff. That's on you.
That's a reasonably priced used car right there, a boat.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Now,
damn nice. Yeah.
Now, guys, I'm not a fortune teller, but I have a sneaky suspicion that debt is going to go up by next episode.
You think? You don't think it's going to turn the corner?
There's not a chance that the debt might come down, Shawn? Maybe?
You know what? I think we'll just have to wait and see, right?
Yeah, I just highly suspicious that it's not going to happen. And yeah, to your point, Bill, I think that is what was some COVID money into that $324 million. And anyway, I can post the link in the show notes if I remember. But yes, and you could put that 11,000 towards down payment on a house, right? Like a mortgage. And speaking
Well,
of,
maybe you could use, you could do it for affordable housing, maybe, which anybody that's actually ever owned a home, I guess, would consider affordable housing an oxymoron, because housings are always it's just a expensive proposition for the owners themselves. But before we get started, I want to ask anyone if they remember what question 3 was at the Rhode Island special election ballot initiative in March 2021. Anyone?
Bueller.
I can't, but I know I probably answered no.
Well, it's a good vote. It was a good vote. A no vote is a good vote for any ballot initiative that's asking for us to put it on the credit card. But question 3 was an affordable housing bond that passed in the state of Rhode Island. Bonus points if people know for how much the bond was for.
I should know.
Nope.
Yeah. I didn't know there was going to be a quiz.
$65 million put on the credit card for affordable housing. Total cost to the taxpayer after the nearly $40,000 of interest is going to be $104 million, as Austin Powers or Dr. Evil might say. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because these types of programs that get put out there, affordable housing programs, it's the feel-good legislation for these elected representatives. They got to be up in the state house and they have to do something. And so when you see a press release coming from some woman out of the Rhode Island General Assembly's publicist, Meredith Whitley, I don't know, maybe probably some $70,000 a year job, puts out a press release saying that Rhode Island needs long-term solutions to solve its housing crisis, and that Senator Megan Callman and Representative June Speakman are calling for passage of their legislation establishing a dedicated funding stream for affordable housing. This is what they're pushing on top of the $65 million that's already been voted by the state by referendum in a special election by mail, and the quote goes on here. It says, "There's no city or town in Rhode Island where a person making the median income for a renter here, which is $34,255, can affordably rent a 2-bedroom apartment. Not one. And there's only 3 communities where someone making $50,000 can." That says a lot about the depth of our affordable housing crisis, says Senator Callman. This problem is not going to be solved with policy tweaks or one-time spending. It's persistent. We need a permanent source of funds to address our housing needs. Now, if it's not going to be solved by policy tweaks or one-time spendings, why the hell did we just spend $65 million voting for this one-time spend to fix affordable housing? Can someone answer that for me? I don't know.
My gosh. So just so I'm getting this straight, because it's again, as with everything in Rhode Island. So we passed this bond referendum, right? 65 million, and now they're going to throw this affordable housing tax on top of that, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, thankfully, it's been held for further study,
Okay.
but this is something that they are pushing for. This is like anything that they're trying to do, like giving away the college education and all the other giveaways that they're doing. And really, it's interesting because all these programs and the legislation that they're actually proposing is, surprise, surprise, another tax is really what it is. And what they're trying to do is that houses that are valued over $500,000, or they transact real estate transactions that are over $500,000, are going to pay an extra tax on anything above that $500,000 threshold. And you sit there and you say to yourself, well, their argument is that we didn't need this one-time $65 million infusion. This is not the first infusion. They do this quite regularly as a way of funding it, because typically, as Shawn mentioned earlier in the show, any funding that comes into the state doesn't go towards affordable housing or anything like that. It goes into the slush fund of the general fund, where it then gets reallocated or scooped into another program or something. But this bill would create a set of funds and take that money and segregate the account and put it directly towards affordable housing programs in the state of Rhode Island. And by the nature of what they're discussing here, a medium renter, so that's one person making $34,000 a year, they can't rent a 2-bedroom apartment. Well, why does, one person need a 2-bedroom apartment? Well, maybe they have kids. There's other situations going on. And these are the people that we're talking about here. And so I just thought it was funny that as this came up, and this has been in the news, there's also a Go Local Providence article out in mid-April that talked about a similar program in 1993, where then Mayor Buddy Cianci announced a program where they were going to build 21 single-family homes that would sell for about $80,000 and be marketed to first-time home buyers. And these are the affordable housing units that they're trying to come up with. And that one of the houses is currently on the market, a 3-bedroom, 1,600 square foot house is now on the market for $395,000, which is a 900% increase in the value of that property. Now that for $100,000, just a little bit more, $105,000 more, this affordable housing property paid for with federal funds could qualify for the proposed tax on the high value real estate transactions. So it just goes to show the absurdity of how this circular logic and, taxing to take money out of the left pocket and put it in your right pocket and calling it economic development. It's unbelievable.
Well, I mean, you look at the line that they're drawing there, $500,000. I mean, that's obviously it's a lot of money, but when it comes to houses in Rhode Island, we know that's not that much money. I mean, it's not a hugely, especially if you're living in certain areas of the state. And then I'm thinking, okay, what's the average rental property, like a multifamily rental property? What's that going to sell for? That's going to be X amount of dollars, right? So that's going to be a tax added to that property. And that person is going to want to recoup that, because we all know taxes are paid by the end user. They're not paid by, the person selling it, or it's going to get passed on to the renter or somewhere down the line. And so you're just increasing the cost of what could potentially be an affordable rental property, right? But
yeah, because I'll tell you one thing, and just real quick to answer that point, Mike, the money that goes into rehabbing these properties is when they change hands, these multifamilies, is coming out of the investor. These are cash buyers that are contractors usually, and they're paying it with their liquid cash as they're doing 1031 like-kind exchanges and everything like that. And any additional tax they have to pay in the real estate transaction is taking money that they're going to put into that house to make improvements for the eventual end user, who's going to be someone who needs affordable housing and of the best quality, which is what the intention of this legislation is. So it's immediately right off the bat taking improvements away from the people who are the end users of the property itself.
It's not only that, but by the market standards, the government fixing a price or putting an artificial target on it of whatever amount of dollars is irrelevant, right? Because once that's set, that sets a really bad precedent. What stops towns and communities and things like that from knowing that magic number and doing a tax assessment to get a certain quantity of properties over that threshold, right? So now you have additional funding revenue, they're going to call it, but it's a higher tax that is not anticipated at that point. So they might be able to see, hey, maybe this program isn't doing so well, or hey, I've got to replenish the general fund, and we go from there. And then we have more and more properties consistently qualifying under them. I know recently in this last tax cycle, which is theft, by the way, in case one didn't know, I saw my property value artificially be raised, right? So it's not unheard of in Rhode Island for these type of valuations to happen, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Well, and with the real estate market being extremely hot as it is right now, I mean, there's very basic 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom homes that are selling in the $300,000 to $350,000 range without a question right now, and not to mention a 3-bedroom. So just the very type of property that they're talking about here is already getting close to that tax. And as the value of our currency is continually debased and inflation occurs and the housing prices rise, do you think that threshold of $500,000 is ever going to be raised to go with, or is just going to be another tax that's just always there with the real estate transaction going forward, that not only is there, but they can always tweak up if they need to as well?
Right. Well, that's another good point you hit on, Bill, was like, okay, so they set it in the legislation at whatever the percentage is, but that's just, again, the stroke of a pen, and that value changes at any point in the future. It's, or it could anyway if it were to pass.
This is also creating a very dangerous precedent of taking property taxes and shipping them to the state, whereas usually property taxes are a town issue and you're paying them to your local town. And that's actually something that those of us who don't have taxes escrowed into their mortgage payments or whatever, when you have to cut that check to the town every quarter, and you have to do that anyway for the car tax as well, it's something that's a very kind of visceral reaction. I think people would be less happy about paying income tax if they had to stroke a check once a year to the federal government.
Right.
But but the fact that it comes out of their paycheck every month, they don't really care about it. So again, that's another facet of this whole entire situation, where now the towns are going to be required to kick the money up, and for now it's sitting in a restricted account, but how long before they're just putting a blanket tax on all property owners to go back to the general fund as well?
Well, on that, Bill, you do know that eventually this will solve the affordable housing crisis and we won't need this anymore. It's going to go away.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and this will be the last point that I'll bring up about the whole entire thing, is that there's no lack of affordable housing in Rhode Island. Like, you can get a low expensive 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom. I mean, nobody likes paying rent. Nobody likes what they get for their rent. I understand the arguments that they're making, but a lot of times when they're doing these studies and the statistics for the properties themselves, it has to be qualified for the definition of affordable housing, which they're trying to change to workforce housing because it sounds better now. But it's essentially what it boils down to is Section 8 housing. And so if it's not a Section 8 rental unit, or a property like they have developments in Barrington and other communities that were affordable housing and is built into the deed of the property, or like a 55 plus community is another example of one of these things. If they're not that type of property, they're not considered affordable housing. So even if you have a 3-bedroom triple decker in Providence or Pawtucket, Central Falls, wherever, and you have people renting that for a relatively low rate, those are considered inferior housing, and they don't get included in the numbers that they're saying. And this is also going to be affected because there was another piece of legislation that just passed, which is the Fair Housing Practices Act, which prohibits landlords from discriminating against renters because of their income source. So this just prevents the landlords from stopping people because of Section 8 housing. And I can tell you, as an insurance professional, that's number one. That's one of the questions they have on the whole underwriting applications, is because there's a different clientele of renters that go with the Section 8 housing, and that they can create a higher liability risk for insurance companies. So they charge a higher premium, or they exclude that as part of their underwriting guidelines. So you're creating this whole entire situation where that small individual contractor that I talked about, who are buying and selling these homes and fixing them up and making some money and improving the community while creating jobs and all this other good stuff, is by all of this regulation and all of these pieces that are being thrown into the soup here that are creating a harder environment, is making those people's jobs obsolete. And we're getting the bigger construction companies that have the contracts directly with the state of Rhode Island doing these big projects that are getting tax incentives for historical tax incentives and all these other ways that housing is subsidized. And what do you end up with at the end of everything is a Fane Tower development that's going up on the 195 land, which is going to be luxury condos in downtown Providence. And who is that really helping with affordable housing? So
Right.
It's a crazy world we live in right now, with everyone thinking they can just solve everyone's problems by a stroke of the pen. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah. So Billy, on that, it's and to Mike's point too, it sounds like all these different things are actually going to increase the cost of these different things, right? So it's not going to be an individual that's going to have to deal with this, but it's really going to be the people that are living there, right, in the housing. So by moving forward with something like this, you're actually hurting the poorest amongst us that this is supposed to help and lift up, right? So it's a state backed oxymoron here.
Yeah.
This is what they complain about when they say gentrification too, right? I mean, there's people, the state sponsored developers come in and raise all of the local neighborhoods and put up, affordable housing units that are all brand new construction, because that's what the whole program's all about.
But, and just going back to what you were saying earlier too, on the forcing, landlords to, accept tenants, and that also just, again, another market distortion, right? Whereas what's the incentive for a person to have good behavior in their life if they know they're not going to have an issue in life in general and finding a place to live or something like that, right? Like if they know that they have no, reason to walk a straight line, so to speak, and make sure their bills are paid on time and they have good, decent credit report and all that other stuff. There's no market incentive there to do that because, the law says he has to give it, or he or she has to give it to me, right? So that's kind of, again, I'm kind of thinking off the cuff here, but that's kind of comes to mind when, so now instead of the landlord taking a gamble on the property, they're gonna, on that tenant, they're gonna be forced to do it, and then speaking of gambling, but I don't know. Does anybody else have to say anything about that?
Oh, beautiful segue. All right, so if you guys have been paying attention to the news or the happenings up at the General Assembly, the IGT deal that we've been talking about the past couple years, it finally received a House Finance Committee approval and a 10-2 vote. The pending legislation, if you want to look it up, we can put in the show notes, but it's House Bill number 5223. And this enables the state of Rhode Island lottery division of the Department of Revenue to execute a 20-year no bid contract to the state-sponsored monopoly on legal gambling. So here's a few of the highlights to catch everybody up on it, right? So this, again, enables the state to enter in a no-bid 20-year contract directly with IGT. We'll pay IGT $25 million cash offer for the privilege. And then IGT will remain the exclusive agent for a wide range of services that have to do with gaming and lottery in Rhode Island. And it's very vague, the terms that they set here. So this really stops a lot of people from coming in and promoting healthy competition or any other business or industries or markets. Some of these things include online lottery systems, online lottery terminals, equipment for manufacturing those, central communication systems for those, Vittery lottery terminals, instant tickets, the vending machines for the instant tickets, the processing services of online instant tickets, and then a general blanket lottery game, just in general, right? Traditional online lottery and instant ticket lottery games that are made available to players through the internet, through computers, through mobile applications on mobile devices, or anything else that could be approved by the division, right? And they get a share of about 5% of the revenue as well. Now, in exchange, IGT is supposed to take $150 million and invest it in Rhode Island, but things that kind of fall under that category include them buying real estate, entering leases, and capital investments to scale their own operations, right? And a lot of those costs are the cost of IGT doing business in Rhode Island. Just like any other business has a cost to scale and grow and provide services, the inverse here is that these guys can charge the state of Rhode Island those funds back, right? So it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy there. They also have to consistently have, I think it was 1,100 people on payroll starting in 2022. And IGT can either hire someone or they can have a contractor or affiliate or a sourcing company provide a body for that. And they're specifically saying that you have to pay that person at least 150% or greater for the minimum wage as well. So that sets a really dangerous precedent in state contracting, right? Where the legislation is approving the wage, but they're going through and saying, well, hang on a second, we can't get this passed, or they already have, right? We're already on the road to $15 an hour, but they're saying, no. We're going to continue forward with that. And through the legislative arm of government contracting, we're going to be able to push forward and get even more relative to that. The biggest problem with that is that the taxpayers are paying for all this, right? So it's not just IGT creating jobs and things like that. IGT is going to charge the government for whatever they pay. This just gives IGT, more of an out to charge additional fringe and overhead that goes back to their profits. It doesn't benefit Rhode Island to do that. It's an interesting thing. And there's really not a whole lot of performance metrics they have to keep, right? So, they have to replace a certain amount of the video equipment and the operating terminals for gaming and things like that. They have to charge the state of Rhode Island to do software and update and hardware updates, but they're setting the conditions for IGT just to charge Rhode Island a whole lot more money to do that, right? Essentially, the state is paying a business to make their own capital investments to grow their business and then charge it back to the state. What other company gets that kind of deal here in Rhode Island? They get the exclusive right to a monopoly. They license this, right? And IGT and their affiliates are the only ones that are qualified for these for the next 20 years because we're not putting it out to bid or anything like that. And while they're continuing to grow, they charge the state for it. In my opinion, against anything else that's happening right now, this is the highest level of cronyism that we've seen in Rhode Island in a long time, which says a lot.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't think that the Democrats would be on board for supporting this, especially since they want to eat the rich and break up big business. They're literally funding it through this, and let's not forget that a lot can happen in 20 years. If their performance drops, the state is going to take the hit on that. And before COVID, gaming in Rhode Island was not meeting the revenue expectations that they thought that they were. And IGT isn't held to that. That's the state, right? I want to open it up for some thoughts, but I've got a couple other highlights to put out, of where the money goes for all of this. There has to be something that benefits the state of Rhode Island out of this. Well, most of the money goes straight into the slush fund, which we already talked about, right?
Go figure.
But hold on a second. There's some very key investments that they're making. 0.2% of the proceeds goes to the definition of distressed communities. 0.05% goes towards property tax relief for the disabled or elderly. About 1% goes towards offsetting motor vehicle tax elimination. We haven't seen that yet, though, but they're writing it in. 0.1% goes towards general appropriations designed to go to the different communities, but historically they've been canceled in a lot of different fiscal years based on the state running out of money. 0.17% of the net terminal income of authorized machines at specifically the Lincoln Gaming Facility will go straight to the Narragansett Indian Tribe for the development of a tribal development fund to be used to purpose and encouraging, promoting home ownership and improvements to housing, elderly housing, vocational training, health and social services, childcare, natural resource protection, economic development consistent with state law. It's just a slush fund. There's such a small amount of these funds that they're going to put towards certain efforts. And this is the reason why people are voting on it. There's a whole lot of pork in this legislation, but you know what? We're going to help the elderly people with 0.05% of income off of a very small portion of the video game terminals. Gambling in Rhode Island is our third largest source of revenue here, with of course, income and sales tax topping the list. IGT has no competition. They lose the incentive here, and they only have to perform inside the bounds of the contract, right? Which sets up a whole. It doesn't say that IGT has to figure out how to produce a certain amount of funds for Rhode Island. They just say no, maintain the status quo, and you get 5% with all these other funds. I wanted to open this up. That's a lot to unpackage there. What do you guys think?
Real quick, Shawn, you used a word there I didn't quite understand. I think it might be Latin or something. You said no bid. Does that mean like 10 bids or 20 bids or?
It's a Roman numeral.
It's not like a no bid. Like, I don't understand. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. So what it means is they're not going to open this contract out to anyone else. They're going specifically with one company to make this arrangement, and they're using legislation to enforce it. Normally, there are supposed to be checks and balances with government contracting, right? But this completely empowers the lottery division to enter in this type of no bid competition, and it's for one specific company. Right now, there is some historical data with IGT has been doing it for a hot minute for the state of Rhode Island, but as we saw before COVID, the revenue was dropping. They were not doing what they were supposed to in terms of the value add to the generation of a lot of this income. But then COVID happened, right? How many people were going to the casinos and gambling? But that's why they're scaling this open to encompass a very vague blanket of gambling online, doing this, doing that. They're really setting IGT up for success. They're not setting any restrictions or controls against this, and they don't have this incentive to perform. Whatever investments they can make now over the course of 20 years will set them up to be able to do this again. Because if there's no other business or company that has the infrastructure that IGT will have, right, that the state of Rhode Island, we as the taxpayers are paying for, they don't have the incentive to continue to perform there, right? They're ready to rock and roll in 20 years. Who else is going to be able to have the footing when only IGT can have the licenses to be able to do this type of stuff? There'll be no one. It's not good for the market here.
So something interesting you said too is the percentage that's going to the to elderly affairs or whatever, however they worded that. Have you ever been to Twin River and looked at what percentage of the money they're making comes from the elderly? Like you go there and it's grandma and grandpa putting around an oxygen tank with a a Marlboro in the other hand, hitting slots. Like it's. And I would like to see the data, if there is any, on what their demographics are for what their average customer is, or whatever you want to call that. It's so they're sucking the money out of that community and only giving them they're giving them a small percentage back.
Yeah, I wonder how many online gambling apps got downloaded on their jitterbugs or whatever the T-Mobile old people phones that allow them to do the gambling. Because God, yeah, they need that fix. I know some old people are very or elderly people, I should say, are very they have the senior buses go take them right to Twin River and they drop them off and they're there the whole afternoon. It's like usually during the right after the first of the month for some reason. I don't know why.
I don't even gamble. Only time I've been there was to watch a couple of concerts. Lotus Land, for any Rush fans out in the audience listening to this, awesome Rush tribute band. But so you just kind of walk around and it's the alien environment. This is kind of weird. But
yeah, it's you mentioned metrics and things like that, Mike. And when they've been talking to the House Financial Committee about this, they kind of brushed over COVID. They said, oh, well, we can't really count any of the metrics or historical data for COVID. And I know with government contracts, you have to be able to prove that you can perform on this. And in the last year, now maybe it was due to a lot of the state lockdown and people not being able to go out and things like that, right? But if they've got a performance trend of not being able to provide the revenue that Rhode Island needs, it doesn't matter if it's the third largest revenue, but besides the rest of the theft that the state's bringing in. Right. The fact of the matter here is they haven't been performing, and we're going to award this company, remove most of our checks and balances that are supposed to protect taxpayer funds, and handing it over to this company for them to, on paper, fund 1,100 FTEs or full-time equivalents of workers inside of the state. Right. And that's setting a really bad precedent for jobs and job growth, because, they have to at least meet the minimum there to continue to progress. As long as they put the check in the box on this contract, they don't have that normal business or market trend incentive to continue to perform. Now, the state comes back and says, well, hold on, that we give 5% of all these other funds outside of all the money we already give IGT to essentially run shop for us. But, they would get more profit if they were to perform better, which is in any case. But if we're going to hand over 25 million to do this and that, they don't have much incentive beyond that. I keep saying the word incentive, but really you're stifling what could really benefit Rhode Islanders here. And you know, I wanna kind of digress from what the current state is, right? Because we've had these types of contracts for a long time in Rhode Island. We're about to sign up and it's gonna pass, right? And that's the sad thing, is another 20-year contract of cronyism to this. But I want to pull you guys, and what is and maybe Mike, you can help me with this. What's the libertarian solution to this
Well,
scenario?
well, I mean, glad you brought that up, because the real question here is, why is the government involved in the casino business at all, right? Like that's the real question here. And the response is going to be, well, it's in the Rhode Island State Constitution. And interestingly enough, that was the response I got from the Republicans. So we posted on David Place, the representative, I think, from Butterville area, posted a tweet, and he was referencing, it was a response to Blake Filippi, and Blake, the tweet was, Blake Filippi questioned why Rhode Island would be agreeing to give the casino 84.43% of the net table game revenue, leaving the state with 12.7 after expenses, when in Massachusetts they take 25%. It's our business, he said. They are our agents, and this is, I guess, in a quote from the Providence Journal. And so here's, you have a Republican saying we should be taking more money out of this. It's our business, as it, again, it's a government-owned business. There's a word for that when the government owns businesses, right? But then David's response was, we are the owners, and our cut is 12.7%, but Mask is 25. Why? Like, your question mark. So the response from the Liberty RI Twitter account was, the real question is, why are we the owners? And it boggles my mind, the responses we got back on that. And these are from the Republicans, right? People who, let me just read this first. Because the voters passed a constitutional amendment to make it that way, until we change the system, we have to work within the one we have, even if we don't like it. As elected officials, we have the responsibility to manage the business the best way possible. And then Blake had responded to the same thing, saying, our state constitution is clear, the people must own the casinos. This is coming from the Republican Party. They have no say in the matter at the State House, right? Nothing they do is going to affect the outcome of this bill. The Democrats can control whether this lives or dies. You have the potential to take a principled position on this, saying we shouldn't even be involved in this. Again, Republicans, quote unquote, free market and all that nonsense that they try to say, which is, not the case. But it's an obvious opportunity for them to take the principled position, and they have these milquetoast responses of, even if we don't like it, it's the system that we have to work within. No, fuck the system. Like, push back and say this is not the way it should be, and use your bully pulpit to say the way it really should be. I mean, I don't know what you guys think about that.
No, I definitely 100% agree with that. There's something that the state shouldn't be involved in to begin with. Shawn talked about the performance in 2020, and they blamed COVID for being the issue of why it wasn't as profitable as it could have been. And then think about 2019, the Patriots won the Super Bowl, so we ended up losing money on the sports book. I mean, what type of entity can lose money with a sports book? I mean, this just goes to show the ineptness of having a government institution running this, and the bureaucracy that goes along with it, that makes it a very bad deal for the taxpayers when you get the basically elected officials involved in it, because you're going to see it one of two ways. You're going to see people like the Democrats who are going to want to find ways that they can extract money from it to make sure they can fund all the programs and all the spending they want to do. And you're going to find the Republicans who are sitting there looking at it as a conservative point of view, the same reason why they don't want people, smoking marijuana or, doing something else. They want to impose their own values on other people, and that we shouldn't be gambling as a society. But if it is going to happen, we're going to go ahead and just, enforce our will on people to make sure it's not done the way that we don't approve of, and that's not right either.
It's like saying if they passed a constitutional amendment that you had to I don't know, get beaten up every Thursday, and they come in and say, well, let's just not all day Thursday, just half a day Thursday, or it's like, no, take a stance, right? And so the response back to me was, "Where's the justification of maintaining anything?" This is David responding. David Placing responding. You asked a question, I answered it. We can talk political courage. You should count the number of liberty-focused bills submitted or signed onto in the last 3 years. I'm certain you won't find any with your name on it. And so you have to go to like some kind of ad hominem attack on, why aren't there, you in there passing stuff. Now I'm not gonna. David, Representative Place, has done some good things. He's good on gun control. He's got some issues. Blake Flippy too. We've give them credit where credit is due, but they're the Republicans, right? They're the quote unquote enemy just as much as the Democrats to libertarians, and except that they like to call off libertarian positions to try to suck that vote in to get them to vote for them. But I'm damn sure going to call you out when you're doing stuff that's obviously a great time to take a principled stance on it and say we shouldn't even be involved in this, but they're addicted to the revenue again,
and the power revenue. and the cronyism. I mean,
right.
I remember from the election back in 2019, this was a major issue. I remember at the time it was IGT was against Twin River, and then they were, the Twin River was going to go take their ball, and they were going to go do everything in house. And then I can't remember, but there was something involved with Gina's office in an unofficial capacity with Brett Smiley threatening somebody or something. And it just, again, this is a power trip of people who are, relying on flexing their political muscle to get certain things done. That again is in the antithesis of what we should be looking for from our state government. It should be getting out of the way and letting the free market decide these types of ventures, and let anybody that wants to put up the capital and follow the general rules that are put there in any type of contract law or anything like that. They can go ahead and open up a casino or open up any type of sports betting book. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, with IGT and this no bid deal, right? They're getting benefits that no other business could possibly qualify for from the state, right? They're able to bear the storm of all the government lockdowns as all the other small businesses and future opportunities and industries that could spur in the state are pushed out, right? And this deal, the way that it's structured, it continues to give them a lot of wiggle room to fail at the cost of the taxpayers, right? And honestly, that's the status quo for anything that's being done in the state.
Yeah.
The guys can't fill a pothole. They can't run the schools, but you expect them to run a casino.
Right. Yeah, that should go well. The bottom line is they're addicted to the revenue, right? And that's they're addicted to the money. And anyway, well, speaking about being addicted to revenue, so I there was an article on WJR about Governor McKee's weekly press conference on Thursdays. Now, I didn't watch the press conference. I just read the article. I don't think I could stomach watch the press conference. Keep my lunch down, but I could barely get through the article itself. But two interesting main points during the press conference. The first one being, at least in the article, the first one up was his reaction to the federal money for unemployment, the little bump up that the federal government, not little, but the bump up the federal government's given everybody that's on unemployment, extra $100 a week. And so it doesn't say what the question was, but the governor said it would be short-sighted to eliminate the added $300 a week federal unemployment benefit, as some states are doing. Why give that back to the federal government, he said, saying that the money brings close to $100 million a month into Rhode Island and is being spent in Rhode Island communities. We're basically hurting ourselves by not trying to protect those dollars. McKee said, those are not coming from our pockets. They're from the incentives to make, they're there for incentives to make sure that people can pay their bills, not coming from our pockets.
No, it's coming from the money printer, and the treasurer has.
It's going to eventually come from our pockets, right? Like it's in one way or the other, either through inflation or through debt, right? Like it's gonna come through, which probably a combination of both, right?
Hey, hang on a second. Hold on. I'm looking at my pay stub right now. No, I pay federal taxes.
Like it is amazing. You have the governor of Rhode Island say, like, you got to ask yourself: is he that economically illiterate that he doesn't understand this? Or is he just trying to dumb it down and be alarmed, essentially, like be disingenuous to the people that he's speaking to or trying to get this message out to. Like, if you don't understand that the money comes from the federal government, also comes from you, I don't know what to tell you.
You got to understand from the politician's point of view is that they're always dealing with other people's money. So it doesn't matter if it's coming from, the federal government or the state government, it's other people's money anyway. So it's all the same to him. I don't think he's dumb enough to not understand the difference. I just think he just doesn't care. And he's so justified by the way that they want to use the money that he'll just say whatever cliche or whatever he has to say to spin and to make it sound good for the cameras. And so they get a sound bite for the news and everybody's placated and get their tummy rubbed and sent on their way.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, right? Because a couple of weeks ago in our one of our past episodes and our article up at libertyri.com about the roads, right?
Roads.
We were looking, and my roads still have potholes in them, but Cicilline and White House were able to get so much money in grants for us, right? All from all this money that just didn't exist popped out of the ether, and we were able to take that money apparently from one source and bring it to there. So that's what McKee's trying to justify. Be like, hey, well, if we didn't take this money, I would just go to something else. Definitely not Rhode Islanders, and we have to help Rhode Islanders. It's absolutely ridiculous, the notion of these funds of money, or it's theft. Right. It's coming from us. If they left it in our pockets, we'd be able to do so much more. We wouldn't need a lot of these things. We'd be able to start more businesses if we didn't have the additional restrictions imposed on us. Even the poorest amongst us would have more money in their take home to be able to progress further. Right. But it's okay, because we're going to take those funds and maybe fill a pothole. Right. We might improve some crumbling infrastructure that was poorly mismanaged for the last 30 years. Right. That's their justification. Oh, we'll just grab more money. Oh, well, that's $100 million that Rhode Island can go and push around everywhere. But we're seeing more than $100 million in loss in both opportunity costs and to the value in Rhode Island. We pulled up the debt clock in the beginning of the episode, and you can see in the loss of GDP and growth that we're just not making it here in Rhode Island. And this is just one incident or example of funds that have an opportunity cost because they've been reappropriated somewhere else.
Well, Shawn, as we learned in the affordable housing segment, these one-time federal influxes of cash are not enough to fix the systemic problem of poor infrastructure in the state of Rhode Island. That is why we also established the Roadworks program in the state of Rhode Island that is going to fund us with tolls. Like, this is the whole idea, is that it's just more taxes to keep on doing the same thing. We're paying different types of taxes from the federal government through the increased cost of consumer goods that are getting transported into the state by trucks who are paying tolls. Eventually, everyone's going to be paying tolls. The property taxes, which are being kicked up to the general fund now, it's that these are just taxes upon taxes upon taxes that get added on, and nobody questions it. It's just this is part of the systemic problem with having the Democrats in power right now.
And the other funny thing about this is they're not even just looking at the steal from Rhode Islanders at this point. They're looking at the steal from the whole country. Anybody, it's on.
And that's one of the problems of having these career politicians at the federal level. You got the Jack Reeds, you got the the Sheldon Whitehouses and Cicilline and Langevin up there, who have been up there forever, and they're getting the federal funds. Mm-hmm. And you may sit there, and I used to hear that a lot when I'm out knocking on doors. People are like, "Oh, well, they're bringing in the cash to the state of Rhode Island. They're bringing in the cash." Well, all they're essentially doing is just covering up the terrible management of our state by terrible local elected leaders. So while you continue to just feed at the teat of the federal government, like pushing money down to the state of Rhode Island and us using it for all these different reasons, you're just providing political cover for all these terrible politicians that have gotten us into the terrible position we're in and to begin with. And the best way to do that is to break the cycle and just vote them all out, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's just propping up a crappy system to begin with. Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Right. You got to think at the end of the day, does someone in Montana care the state of the roads or the state of any infrastructure in Rhode Island? Right. Well, they're paying for it. Right.
Yeah.
It's the same. Rhode Islanders should be up in arms too about where their federal funds go. And this goes real deep. Right. Where we're consistently funding at the federal level intervention in foreign affairs and wars and things like that. Right. Well, Rhode Island dollars are going towards that. Right. And I think we need to get into the habit, and this happens at the political level, right? Of being able to say enough is enough, and you have to bring that through change. And these politicians aren't bringing that because, well, hold on, I can allocate 0.02% of this income that comes into the elderly and disabled, and that's really important to me. And regardless of the rest of the whatever this is going to cost, at least 0.02% of it is going to go towards the elderly,
and that's what gets the headlines. And that gets the headlines.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, the second part of his, I guess, this is typically the COVID briefing anyway. So the second part was about that and about lifting mandates and whatnot. And according to this article, during the briefing is when the CDC released its revised guidelines for people who have been fully vaccinated and whatnot. So I'll jump to the newest ones, but in here he was giving out some arbitrary dates and information. McKee also said nightclubs can be open. Let me step back a little bit. Says the governor said sports tournaments, including out-of-state teams, can resume Monday, pushing up an earlier timeline of May 28th. He said nightclubs can open to 100% capacity if they require patrons to prove they've been vaccinated for 50% or 50% if the club doesn't require it as of May 28th. Either way, the target date for allowing full capacity without having to prove anything is going to be July 1st. So now here we've got this concept of vaccine passports, right? Now you got to bring your vaccination. They haven't said how you're going to prove it, but we can assume logically that it's going to be your vaccination card or something to that effect that you have to show to get into the nightclub or whatnot. And again, it's just this absolute insanity of the government putting these restrictions on a business. Let the business decide for themselves whether or not they want to allow people in their club that are vaccinated or not, and how they want to manage that, right? And the company, the business will live or die on those decisions. Like it's their decision ultimately. It's unbelievable. But then there's that arbitrary date of July 1st. It's going to that process is going to go away. So it's just this insanity. Ridiculous.
If you follow the science, it'll be a lot safer July 1st.
Follow the science. Well, which goes to the other point of this. So the CDC released the guidelines basically saying if you're fully vaccinated, again, we can argue that's a separate argument, but you can go outside, interact with people without a mask, within confined spaces. It doesn't matter. You're basically good to go, return to normal, so to speak, right? But yet here comes the state, where they say they're gonna, I believe it was on they're going to set it up to Tuesday now. So it's okay. So the CDC says it's good now. Again, it's another government agency, but whatever. If we're using that as a measure, the guiding force in all of this, they say it's okay now. Why do you have to wait till Tuesday? Just say, oh, okay, let's open it up. What's going to happen between Thursday when he found this out and this coming Tuesday? It's just
weird time to flex your state's rights, right?
It's insane. It's almost like that's exactly what they're flexing their muscles, saying we're in control here, and you'll do what we say you can do when we say it, not not before or we're the authority here. It's unbelievable. Well, Shawn, you had an interesting experience, right? Like just being out in the public. I had to go out this week. I was home all weekend and doing yard work and stuff, but
yeah, so I routinely attend events with my family, my children's sporting events and things like that. And usually up until this point, it's been masks on, right? And usually it's you got everyone distance and they're following everything to a T. Today's event was way different. In less than the span of a week, not a single mask was worn. Right. It's interesting, the notion of being able to influence someone by just saying something, and being saying, hey, all of a sudden, because I said so, I was just telling you it wasn't safe, but now I'm saying that it's safe now. And probably because they've been losing momentum in being able to push out vaccinations and things like that. And they've noticed the very staggering effects of keeping things locked down. But I just thought it was really funny that, now that the government has just kind of come out and saying it's okay, the sheer quantity of people that have kind of flexed with that, and they really do step in line. And I think it's a really dangerous precedent for things like that. When, the federal government saying, hey, you could definitely walk around without a mask, but if you're unvaccinated, you have to wear a mask, right? So the notion of people following that, it's more of a shame-based tactic at that point to get people in to start pushing vaccinations and things like this. And it's a horrible precedent to start saying we never did that with the flu, right? The flu shot, we never did that any time else. But the problem is we've set that precedent. So now that the people with power know that we could flex in these different directions, you could definitely paint the narrative to achieve certain results like that. It's really bad at the state and the federal level for that, and it's even more embarrassing at the state level that we're following suit like that. To Billy's point, right? Let's give up our state rights, and people in Rhode Island seem okay to do that, right? They seem okay, and they seem very comfortable. And maybe it's because of a year of conditioning, a year of these things, the year of following the science, a year just it just doesn't add up to me. I don't know.
I mean, we discussed this too. The Overton window has been moving over the last few years, where you had the nurses refusing the flu vaccine and then having to wear masks. That was a big story in Rhode Island. The HPV vaccine for students, I don't know, what is it? Were they 14 years old or something like that, or something that they need to get the HPV vaccine? But these things have been requirements leading up to this point. And to Shawn, your point, a year of conditioning where people are like, oh, you need to get vaccine, you need to wear your mask, you need to do the X, Y, and Z. It's tough to give up that power, and especially from an executive that knows that as soon as they get rid of the state of emergency, that is almost a guarantee to, if not completely shut off, slow the federal funds that they're going to qualify for, and just completely starve the beast of all these additional programs and people that are out there doing that. And they don't want to give that up for a second. So until somebody actually goes and like to Shawn's point, which you saw at the event, which is a great sign to see, until people just start saying, to hell with this, we're going to go do our own thing and let's see them stop us, you're not going to see a lot of people change back to going back to normal. And you're going to have a lot of people, it's already starting, who are virtue signaling or saying, I don't want to take the mask off because it may make me look like a conservative or a Trump supporter. And that's the worst reason ever to wear a mask. And it's something that is, it's a strange world we're living in right now, where, people are volunteering to wear a mask to show that they're doing it for someone else. It's just unbelievable. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I mean that right there, we've seen the screenshots that have been floating around. It's completely boggles your mind about people that are like, oh no, I have to. It's like their security blanket, right? Like this is how I prove to the world that I'm, a virtuous person, and now that's being taken away. So I just wanted to read real quick. So there's some other interesting things though with this on Tuesday. Not everything is going away. It's the CDC guidance is, when you go to the website, it says you can resume activities as you did prior to the pandemic if you've been fully vaccinated, according to them, right? But when you go to the list of what the rollout coming from the state is, again, we've already talked the date being Tuesday, but it's saying indoor dining, 100% capacity, but still 3 feet spacing. Bar areas, indoor standing service, no plexiglass required. Catered events, 100% capacity, no cap. Indoor standing bar service, cocktail hours, open dance floors. Houses of worship, 100% capacity, still 3 feet apart. Still 3 feet apart for retail. Still 3 feet apart for gyms. Personal services. Anyway, it goes on and on, but there's still have requirements, even though it's very clearly written on the CDC website saying that if you've been fully vaccinated, you can resume activities that you did prior to the pandemic. So they're not even instituting any kind of, but they do have an interesting clause in there because they don't want to get in trouble with the states, right? It says you can resume activities without wearing a mask or staying 6 feet apart, except where required by federal, state, local, tribal, or territorial laws, rules, regulations, including local business and workplace guidance. So now, I'll agree again with local business and workspace, workplace guidance. That's their decision in a private established how they want to handle their business. But the other part of that, right? Like so that's kind of how they get around, kind of get out of jail free card. I guess I don't know what you want to call that, but
that goes back to the same point. Like if you want to wear a mask after the CDC guidelines have ended, you can go ahead and continue to wear your mask. And like everyone's going to say, and it doesn't have to be for any pretense to show that you're not a conservative or, whatever. If you want to wear one, go for it. But I also noticed, and I may be delirious, but I kind of noticed that the definition of a Karen, I feel like at the beginning of a pandemic, was somebody yelling at someone else for not wearing a mask, that they were saying, oh, you need to wear a mask, you need to have something on. And somehow, somewhere halfway through summer, a definition of a Karen turned into someone who wasn't wearing a mask, and when everybody was yelling at her for not wearing a mask. And I just thought that was a kind of a weird social online thing that I observed, but I may just be completely crazy, but it's just anyway, I digress.
Yeah, it's the science. That's what science.
Follow the science.
Mike, it's interesting when you said like all the different restrictions or the lifting and the continuing requirements, but never in there do they say anything about the science or anything that they're touting that says except where there's a rule or there's a law or there's a regulation that says it's okay to do these things, right? So we're not making decisions on the basis of a lot of those things. We're making it based on the whatever rules that someone in a position of power are setting out, and that's just another bad precedent.
Yeah, it's insanity. Anyway, it's the world we live in, I guess, right? Anybody guys, anything else to add?
I don't think so. It was covered a lot tonight. For sure. Good show.
Yeah, definitely getting in the groove for sure. So
I think we should throw it out there that if anybody has any particular topics that they would like us to discuss, how could they get in contact with us and send that information over to us?
So you can always reach out to us on our social media platforms, right? Facebook, Twitter, but definitely go and connect with us on libertyri.net. You got to go to libertyri.net, register. It's our own social community. We control it. Nobody's going to shut you down. It's our stuff. So you want to start a group, it's not going to get deleted. It's, you control your own destiny there. But yeah, definitely go to libertyri.net. First, you can find all the links to our social media, our contact form if you want to send us an email at libertyri.com/connect. And if you want to hear the podcast and share it with your friends on social media and let everybody know about it, rate us, give us some reviews. And you can find us on all the podcast outlets, Apple, Google, Stitcher, Spotify. We're on Spotify twice, and Shawn noticed that. And that's a glitch from when we restarted the podcast. And I don't know if we take it down now. My worry is the people that are following one are going to get cut off, and then so we don't pay for it. So if they want to have us on there twice, we'll be on there twice.
Rate them both.
Yeah, exactly. Right, double your fund. And then all the other major podcast catchers. So yeah, definitely follow us and get the word out that we're back and having a great time. So until next time, everybody stay safe and be good.
Take it easy.
Have a good one.
You've been listening to the Rhode Island Liberty Report. Be sure to check us out at libertyri.com.